Hey everybody.
Fatbird Finds here.
I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Laura.
Laura, how's it going?
Great. Happy Saturday afternoon. We're here with the podcast for Frankenstein.
It's the Saturday before Halloween.
I know, how fitting.
It's very fun. And we still have a long way to go. So, we were trying to do a countdown to Halloween, but it's going to be more of a countdown to another day. But that's fine.
That's okay. It's still very, we've got 3 whole chapters to do right in the middle of the book. So that ought to suffice for Halloween theme.
So maybe we should recap what's happening.
Yes.
So you're listening to Tales from the Put-Out Closet.
That's right.
We're reading Frankenstein.
That's right.
We've read up until chapter 8.
Yes.
And what's the last thing that happened? Our good friend Justine has bit the dust.
Yes. And I think that it was a very dramatic episode last week.
Yeah.
Because, I think everyone is pretty mad at Victor because
Victor's the worst.
Yeah. He just kind of wrung his hands in grief or whatever, but he did not do anything. He didn't fess up. He didn't try to, he says he tried to save her, but I don't know.
I don't buy it. I'm not into Victor right now.
I know, right? And then he ends by saying, grieving the death of William and Justine, and just the first hapless victims of my unhallowed arts.
Oh,
that was our last line from
week.
last
So more victims to come. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The worst does not happen. It's not over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those of you who are listening out there in podcast land, we are doing this podcast live from YouTube today. We've done the last few live just simply because we haven't pre-recorded them. I think it's worked out pretty well. I think that people enjoy it live.
Yeah, I like it both ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are out there in podcast land, we would love it if you considered coming over to YouTube and subscribing to our channel, Fatbird Finds. That would be great. We go live periodically, and yeah, we would just love it. Those of you who are on YouTube, make sure you say hello in the chat. I see Karen and Sharon, Grace, and Nikki. Welcome, Nikki. So yeah, shall we just proceed?
Yeah, why don't we? Do you want to start or do you want me to?
It's up to you.
I'm good either way.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm holding the book.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
That sounds great.
Do you know something I don't?
I don't.
Is this going to be a hard chapter?
No, I usually read ahead, and I actually have not this week. So,
well, damn.
We'll see.
Okay. Chapter 9. Nothing is more painful to the human mind than, after a feeling has been worked up by a quick succession of events, the dead calmness of inaction and certainty which follows and deprives the soul both of hope and fear. Yeah,
remember that just reminded me, he had a fit of anxiety / grief.
Yeah.
Right?
He should have.
Yeah.
He's the absolute worst.
So now he's like, well, all that's over, and now then I'm just, empty inside.
Justine died. She rested, and I was alive. The blood flowed freely in my veins, but a weight of despair and remorse pressed on my heart, which nothing could remove. Well, good, Victor. It's your fault. All you had to do was man up, Victor. Sleep fled from my eyes. I wondered like an evil spirit. For if I had committed deeds of mischief beyond description, horrible and more, much more, I persuaded myself, was yet behind. Yet my heart overflowed with kindness and the love of virtue. I had begun life with benevolent intentions and thirsted for the moment when I should put them in practice and make myself useful to my fellow beings. Now all was blasted.
Blasted. Yeah, it's all over, Victor.
Instead of that serenity of conscience, which I allowed me to look back upon with past and self-satisfaction, and from thence to gather promise of new hopes, I was seized by remorse and the sense of guilt, which hurried me to a hell of intense tortures such as no language can describe.
Oh,
good.
He tried, though.
Good. You deserve it.
That was some pretty descriptive language right there.
He deserves it, though.
I mean, don't you feel sorry for him a little bit, though? I mean, that's pretty bad.
No, I don't. All he had to do was be like, "Excuse me, sheriff, you know, something you don't know about me is I created this creature a few years back. It's been, just romping around the countryside. I think that might have been what happened. I don't really think Justine did it." That's all he had to say.
They would have thrown him into some medieval insane asylum, and that'd have been the end of him.
True. This state of mind preyed upon my health, which had perhaps never entirely recovered from the first shock it had sustained. I shunned the face of man. All sound of joy or complacency was torture to me. Solitude was my only consolation. Deep, dark, death-like solitude.
Well, where does that leave Elizabeth? That's my problem with the whole thing.
Poor Elizabeth.
He is like really no good to her at all.
No. Elizabeth, you can do better. If you're listening, Elizabeth, move on. My father observed with pain the alteration perceptible in my disposition and habits, and endeavored my arguments, deduced from the feelings of his serene conscience and guiltless life, to inspire me with fortitude, and awaken me in the courage to dispel a dark cloud which brooded over me. "Do you think, Victor," said he, "that I do not suffer also? No one could love a child more than I loved your brother." Tears came into his eyes as he spoke. "But it is not a duty to the survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by an appearance of immortal grief. It is also a duty owed to yourself, for excessive sorrow prevents improvement or enjoyment, or even the discharge of daily usefulness, without which no man is fit for society."
Well, that's good advice to the average person, but little does his father know.
Little does he know
that he has a part to play in all of this.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's really angsty and tragic.
I wish people still spoke like this. Now we're just like, get over it. Get your pants on and let's go.
Exactly.
This advice, although good, was totally inapplicable to my case.
Oh, it's just what I said.
I should have been the first to hide my grief and console my friends, if remorse had not mingled its bitterness, and terror its alarm, with my other sensations. Now I could only answer my father with a look of despair, and endeavor to hide myself from his view.
You know what that reminds me of?
What?
Last night we had to watch that terrible show that was the top 10 horror moments of all time.
Yeah.
And it was that movie Inheritance where that kid
Hereditary.
Oh, Hereditary. I'm sorry. I didn't even know the correct name of the movie.
That movie's hard to watch.
I didn't watch it, but I did see that clip, and they showed that whole clip where he was with his sister when, I'll just say, something unspeakable happens, and he comes home and leaves the car like it is, and they just show him the whole time laying in his bed, catatonic.
And you, the viewer, knows what's happening.
Yeah, and dreading the moment when his
family is going to find out what he's done.
Goes down and discovers what's happened. So I thought that was so scary and so tragic. And see, it's kind of the same thing. We're looking at Victor, looking at his dad and his family, Elizabeth, and they don't know what he's done. They don't know how complicit he is in all of this.
You're right. It's exactly right. Let's see. About this time, we retired to our house at Belrive. This change was particularly agreeable to me. Hold on. Let me make sure. Yeah, that was correct. I was making sure I was in the right place. About this time, we retired to our house at Belrive. This change was particularly agreeable to me. The shutting of the gates regularly at 10 o'clock and the impossibility of remaining on the lake after that hour had rendered our residence within the walls of Geneva very irksome to me. I was now free. Often after the rest of the family had retired for the night, I took the boat and passed many hours upon the water. Sometimes with my sails set, I was carried by the wind, and sometimes after rowing into the middle of the lake, I left the boat to pursue its own course. and gave way to my own miserable reflections. I was often tempted when all was at peace around me, and I, the only unquiet thing that wandered restless in the scene so beautiful and heavenly. If I except some bat or the frogs whose harsh and interrupted croaking was heard only when I approached the shore, often I say I was tempted to plunge into the silent lake, that the waters might close over me and my calamities forever. But I was restrained when I thought of the heroic and suffering Elizabeth, whom I tenderly loved.
Thank God.
Good for you, Victor.
Finally.
Oh my God.
Finally, he considers Elizabeth.
Who I tenderly loved and whose existence was bound up in mine. Was it though?
Yeah, no doubt.
I thought also of my father and surviving brother. Should I, by my base desertion, leave them exposed and unprotected to the malice of the fiend whom I had let loose among them?
Yes, not to mention that.
Not to mention that,
I mean,
Victor.
We've been hating on Victor for all these other reasons, and we forgot the most important thing is the thing's still out there.
He's like, I just like to row my boat in the middle of the lake and just lay there and think about my life and how sad I am. But, oh, wait, there is Elizabeth and my dad and my other brother. Oh, and that creature that I created that's just running amok in town.
Amok.
Gosh, do something. If you see something, say something.
That's right. I mean, all this flowery, beautiful, romantic language about how angsty and mournful he is fine and all. But come on.
Take some responsibility, Laura. At these moments, I wept bitterly and wished that peace would revisit my mind, only that I might afford them consolation and happiness. But that could not be. Remorse extinguished every hope, and I had been the author of unalterable evils, and I lived in daily fear lest the monster whom I had created should perpetuate some new wickedness. I had an obscure feeling that all was not over, and that he would still commit some signal crime, by which its enormity should almost efface the recollection of the past. There was always scope for fear, so long as anything I loved remained behind. My abhorrence of this fiend cannot be conceived. Yeah. When I thought of him, I gnashed my teeth.
Oh my God.
Eyes became inflamed, and I ardently wished to extinguish that life which I had so thoughtlessly bestowed. Well, do it. Go out on a hunt.
He's like gnashing his teeth. I mean, that is pretty.
Get yourself
extreme.
A slingshot and a sword or something and go out there. Find it.
It's just funny. Why isn't that not occurring to him? I don't understand that. I guess we're so used to these shows where the protagonist, I guess you would say, goes out and takes charge and kicks butt. This is not that kind of story.
When I reflected on his crimes and malice, my hatred and revenge burst all bounds of moderation. I would have made a pilgrimage to the highest peak of the Andes. Could I, when there, have precipitated him to their base? I wish to see him again, that I might wreak the utmost extent of abhorrence on his head.
Well, he doesn't,
and avenge the deaths of William and Justine.
He doesn't wish it too bad. He's not.
He's going just floating around in his boat. He's just out there floating around.
I'm tickled because it's true.
Thinking about, I would scale the highest mountain and go beat his head with a club. Well, do it.
I think the younger people these days say he's in his head. He's really in his head about this. He is not being rational.
Yeah. Our house was the house of mourning. My father's health was deeply shaken by the horror of the recent events. Elizabeth was sad and desponding. She no longer took delight in her ordinary occupations. All pleasure seemed to her sacrilege toward the dead. Eternal woe and tears, she then thought, were the just tribute she should pay to the innocence so blasted and destroyed. She was no longer that happy creature who in earlier youth wandered with me on the banks of the lake and talked with ecstasy of our future prospects. The first of these sorrows which are sent to wean us from the earth had visited her, and its dimming influence quenched her dearest smiles. When I reflect, my dear cousin, said she, on the miserable death of Justine, I no longer see the world and its works as they were before appeared to me. Before I looked on the accounts of vice and injustice, I read in books or heard from others as tales of ancient days or imaginary evils. At least they were remote and more familiar to reason than to the imagination. But now misery has come home, and men appear to me as monsters thirsting for each other's blood. Yet I am certainly unjust. Everybody believes that poor girl to be guilty, and if she could have committed the crime for which she suffered, assuredly she would not have been the most depraved of human creatures. For the sake of a few jewels, to have murdered the son of her benefactor and friend, a child whom she had nursed from its birth and appeared to love as if it had been her own. I could not consent to the death of any human being, but certainly I should have thought such a creature unfit to remain in the society of men. But she was innocent. I feel she was innocent. You are of the same opinion, and that confirms me. Alas, Victor, when falsehood can look like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? I feel as if we were walking on the edge of a precipice towards which thousands are crowding and endeavoring to plunge me into the abyss. William and Justine were assassinated, and their murderer escapes. He walks about the world free and perhaps respected, but even if I were condemned to suffer on the scaffold for the same crimes, I would not change places with such a wretch.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean,
well, that has to make him feel like an asshole.
I was just gonna say, he's getting all this credit, all this credit from her, and he's just sitting there taking it in.
He's just listening,
yeah,
she's like nodding his head.
She's so happy that he is as sure as she is about Justine's innocence. But I mean, he actually has reason to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's like
the whole thing's a
knowing you're
mess.
guilty of something and somebody talking about it and you know you've done it and you're just like,
Yeah.
The cat who ate the canary.
Beth's letting everybody know that Frankenstein is showing on Turner Classics on Halloween. So
nice.
If you're watching this before Halloween, you might tune into that.
I listened to this discourse with the extremist agony.
Yeah.
I bet you did.
Oh, we're really, we're getting good at that.
Yeah. I, not indeed, but in effect, was the true murderer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth read my anguish in my countenance. Drink.
Oh.
And kindly taking my hand said, "My dearest friend, you must calm yourself. These events have affected me, God knows how deeply, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair and sometimes revenge in your countenance that makes me tremble. Dear Victor, banish these dark passions. Remember the friends around you, who center all their hopes in you. Have we lost the power of rendering you happy?"
Who's talking?
Elizabeth to him.
Okay.
She's like, "Dude, we're all unhappy, but you've got to pull yourself together. You look like you want to just murder everybody, or you want, you look like you're just like feeling really guilty about this. It's not your fault."
Yes.
That's what she's saying.
While you've stopped for a second, I just want to say hi to people that are joining us. I think there's people listening at fast speed and joining in.
Oh, that's funny.
I think you didn't get the thing posted.
Yeah, sorry about
too
that.
far ahead of time, so they're trying to catch up.
Thanks, Laura. Laura's just like,
I meant we.
No, Laura just said to me,
No, I meant
you
we.
didn't get this scheduled in time for people to really have time to listen in. Thanks. You're welcome. While we love, while we are true to each other, Here in this land of peace and beauty, your native country, we may reap every tranquil blessing. What can disturb our peace? She's like, it's going to be okay. We've got family, you've got friends, we've got this beautiful place where we live. It's gonna be okay.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth. And such, oh God, and could not such words from her whom I fondly prized before every other gift of fortune suffice to chase away the fiend that lurked in my heart. Even as she spoke, I drew near to her as if in terror, lest at that very moment the destroyer had been near to rob me of her. So it's like, I mean, I hear you and I really want to grasp onto what you're saying, but that monster could bust up in this house any minute. I could be out floating in my boat and he could just like come out like Jason Voorhees and just grab me any minute.
It's so terrible. The whole thing is so tragic.
Yeah. Thus not the tenderness of friendship, nor the beauty of earth, nor of heaven, could redeem my soul from woe. Mm-hmm. The very accents of love were ineffectual. Mm-hmm. I was encompassed by a cloud which no beneficial influence could penetrate. The wounded deer, dragging its fainted limbs to some untrodden brake, there to gaze upon the arrow which had pierced it, and to die, was but a type of me. Man.
I'm telling you, I'm really, actually, for a moment, to be serious, impressed with reading this book at how powerfully romantic the words are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even
Mary
though
Shelley.
I mean, I guess that's what Gothic is, that it's sad and mournful and tragic, but gosh.
Yeah.
So, like, overly romantic.
Yeah, and how old was she? Like 18
Yeah.
when she wrote this?
Yeah, it's insane.
When I was 18, I was an idiot.
Pass me another round.
Sometimes I could cope with the sullen despair that overwhelmed me, but sometimes the whirlwind passions of my soul drove me to seek, by bodily exercise and by change of place, some relief from my intolerable sensations. It was during an access of this kind that I suddenly left my home, and bending my steps toward the near alpine valleys, sought in the magnificence of eternity of such scenes to forget myself and my ephemeral, because human sorrows. That's written really weirdly. I feel like I need to reread that sentence.
Okay.
It was during an access of this kind that I suddenly left my home, and bending my steps toward the near alpine valleys, sought the magnificence, the eternity of such scenes,
right,
to forget myself and my ephemeral, because human sorrows. That's written really strangely. My wanderings were directed towards the valley of, oh my gosh, Chamonix. How do you think that's pronounced?
Chamonix?
Chamonix? I had visited it frequently during my boyhood. 6 years had passed since then. I was a wreck, but naught had changed in those savage and endearing scenes. I performed the first... So he's like going on this like...
That's what I'm like,
pilgrimage?
What? He's like gone off by himself into the woods again. Elizabeth has just like poured her heart out to him.
God bless her.
And said, everything's going to be okay. You know, we've got each other. And now he's on some pilgrimage again.
He just leaves her all the time.
This beautiful place where he can reflect upon how miserable he is.
Or do you think maybe he's going out to try to solve the problem? Do you think maybe he's going to look for it?
That's not what he said, but maybe that's what it is. That isn't what he said, though.
I performed the first part of my journey on horseback. I afterwards hired a mule, as the more sure-footed and least liable to receive injury on these rugged roads. The weather was fine. It was about the middle of the month of August, nearly 2 months after the death of Justine, that miserable epoch from which I dated all my woe. The weight upon my spirit was sensibly lightened as I plunged yet deeper in the ravine of Arve, or Arve. The immense mountains and precipices that overhung me on every side, the sound of the river raging among the rocks, and the dashing of the waterfalls around, spoke of a power mighty as omnipotence, and I ceased to fear or to bend before any elements, here displayed in their most terrific guise. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Good for you. Still, as I ascended higher, the valley assumed a more magnificent and astonishing character. Ruined castles hanging on the precipices of piney mountains.
Wow.
Wow. I want to go there.
Me too.
And impetuous Arve and cottages every here and there, peeping forth from among the trees, formed a scene of singular beauty. But it was augmented and rendered sublime by the mighty Alps, whose white and shining pyramids and domes towered above all.
Don't forget, we are right in the middle of the most beautiful, probably
right,
scenic countryside in the world.
Whose white and shiny pyramids and domes towered above all, as belonging to another earth, the habitations of another race of beings. I passed the bridge of Pellissier, where the ravine with the which the river forms opened before me, and I began to ascend the mountains that overhangs it. Does he have any climbing gear?
Well, a mule's a good step, I guess.
Well, he said that he had the mule for the first part of his journey, but I mean, this sounds dangerous. What do I know?
What is he doing, though?
I don't think we know.
What is he doing?
I don't know.
Okay.
Now I've lost my place.
Sorry.
It's okay. La da 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 da.
By the way, while she's finding her place, don't forget that every time the word countenance comes up, that's a drinking game. Everybody drinks.
Yeah. Soon after I entered the valley of what did we say? Chamonix? This valley is more wonderful and sublime, but not so beautiful and picturesque as that is Cerveau, through which I had just passed. The high and snowy mountains were its immediate boundaries, but I saw no more ruined castles and fertile fields. Immense glaciers approached the roads. I heard the rumblings of thunder and the falling avalanche and marked the smoke of its passage. Mont Blanc, the supreme and magnificent Mount Blanc, raised itself from the surrounding all these words that I cannot pronounce.
Yeah, I don't know.
Agiles and its tremendous dome overlooking the valley.
I mean, they're in French or whatever.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'm not good at it. A tingling, long-lost sense of pleasure often came across me during this journey. Some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of days gone by.
What came across him on this journey?
I don't know. Some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of days gone by.
Okay.
And were associated with the light-hearted gaiety of boyhood.
So he's just walking down memory lane, so to speak.
The very winds whispered in soothing accents, and maternal nature bade me weep no more. Then again, the kindly influence ceased to act. I found myself fettered again to grief and indulging in the misery of reflection. So, I mean, that's just kind of how grief is. You're doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, God, that really did happen. Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
Or he catches himself enjoying the beauty that's surrounding him, or catches himself in a nice boyhood memory. And then just and
then he's like, oh, back. God, remember a couple of years ago I made that thing? And it's just out here?
I still don't know what he's doing.
What are you doing, Victor?
Where's he going?
I've lost my place again. This keeps happening. Then again, the kindly influence ceased to act. I found myself fettered again to grief and indulging in all the misery of reflection. Then I spurred on my animal, striving to forget the world, my fears, and more than all, myself. Or, in a more desperate fashion, I alighted and threw myself on the grass, weighed down by horror and despair.
Oh my God.
He's having a minute. He's having a little...
He's having a moment.
Yeah. At length, I arrived in the village of Chamonix, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know now how to pronounce it.
Exhaustion succeeded to the extreme fatigue, both of my body and of mind, which I had endured. For a short space of time, I retained at the window, watching the pallid lightnings that played above, Mount Blanc, and listening to the rushing of the Arve, which pursued its noisy way beneath. The same lulling sounds acted as a lullaby to my too keen sensations. Then I placed my head upon my pillow. Sleep crept over me. I felt as if it came and blessed the giver of oblivion.
Okay. All right.
That is the end of chapter 9.
Does anybody that's live here with us in the chat, does anybody have any suggestion of where he's going or what he's doing?
What is he doing out there?
I mean, I know he's reflecting, but I mean, does he have a purpose? I don't understand. Okay. I was just going to see if anybody else had any thoughts on that.
If I were Elizabeth, I would be like, look, I'm leaving. I'm going to go find Henry and chill with him for a while.
Well, she doesn't have to leave. He's gone.
No, I know, but I would be like, if and when you ever come back, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go find somebody else to hang out with.
To get me through this.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you continue on with chapter 10.
Okay.
If you want to.
Chapter 10, everybody. Feel free to comment in the chat.
Yeah, feel free to comment. I know not a ton of you are here, but we would love to chat away with you.
Okay, he's still on his journey on chapter 10. I spent the following day roaming through the valley. I stood beside the sources of the Arviron, which take their rise in a glacier, that which slow pace is advancing down the summit of the hills to barricade the valley. The abrupt sides of vast mountains were before me. The icy wall of the glacier overhung me. A few shattered pines were scattered around, and the solemn silence of thin, glorious presence chamber of imperial nature was broken only by the brawling waves or the fall of some vast fragment, the thunder sound of the avalanche, or the cracking reverberating along the mountains of the accumulated ice, which through the silent working of immutable laws was ever and anon rent and torn, as if it had been but a plaything in their hands. That was a really long sentence.
Prairie Stone Collectibles. I'm very late. 9 chapters late. This seems so serious. It is.
It is. We have fun commenting, but it is a very serious subject matter.
Jamie's like, I'm caught up now. And just have this to say. Victor needs to grow a pair.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
We don't know. We're trying to decide, you guys, we're trying to decide whether we think, is Victor going to throw himself off of one of these Swiss Alps?
Well,
of these mountains?
I don't think he's going to do that because we know later he's on that ship.
So I know, but I'm just wondering, as the reader in the middle of this, what he's doing. Maybe Jamie has a comment on what she thinks he's doing. I don't know. These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. They elevated me from all littleness of feeling, and although they did not remove my grief, they subdued and tranquilized it. In some degree also, they diverted my mind from the thoughts over which it had brooded for the last month. I retired to rest at night, my slumbers, as it were, waited on and ministered to by the assemblance of grand shapes which I had contemplated during the day. They congregated around me. The sustained snowy mountaintop, the glittering pinnacle, the pine woods and ragged bare ravine, the eagle soaring amidst the clouds, they all gathered round me and bade me be at peace. Where had they fled when the next morning I awoke? All of soul inspiriting fled with sleep, and dark melancholy clouded every thought. Okay, so he went to bed feeling okay about things. Now he's woken up and it's all gone. The rain was pouring in torrents, and thick mists hid the summits of the mountains so that I even saw not the faces of those mighty friends. Still I would penetrate their misty veil and seek them in their cloudy retreats. What were rain and storm to me? My mule was brought to the door, and I resolved to ascend to the summit of Montevere. I remembered the effect that the view of the tremendous and ever-moving glacier had produced upon my mind when I first saw it. It had then filled me with a sublime ecstasy that gave wings to the soul and allowed it to soar from the obscure world to light and joy. The sight of the awful and majestic in nature had indeed always the effect of solemnizing my mind and causing me to forget the passing cares of life. I determined to go without a guide, for I was well acquainted with the path, and the presence of another would destroy the solitary grandeur of the scene.
Thrifter Not Hoarder is like, did he tell anybody about the monster yet? I missed the last chapter. No. He's just letting it do around.
Jamie's, yeah, do around. And I mean, and now he's on this journey to self-healing maybe or something. But we thought maybe he was out there hoping to run into the monster to destroy it. But I don't think so.
I mean, he doesn't even, I just can't.
The ascent is precipitous, but the path is cut into continual and short windings, which enable you to surmount the perpendicularity of the mountain. It is a scene terrifically desolate. In 1,000 spots, the traces of the winter avalanche may be perceived, where trees lie broken and strewed on the ground, some entirely destroyed, others bent, leaning upon the jutting rocks of the mountains or transversely upon other trees. I guess it looks like the tornado path or something.
Yeah, maybe.
The path as you ascend higher is intersected by ravines of snow, down which stones continually roll from above. One of them is particularly dangerous, as the slightest sound, such as even speaking in a loud voice, produces a concussion of air sufficient to draw destruction upon the head of the speaker. Wow.
Yeah.
The pines are not tall or luxuriant, but they are somber and add an air of severity to the scene. I locked in the valley beneath. Vast mists were rising from the rivers which ran through it and curling in thick wreaths around the opposite mountains, whose summits were hid in the uniform clouds, while rain poured from the dark sky and added to the melancholy impression I received from the objects around me. Alas, why does man boast of sensibilities superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now we are moved by every wind that blows and a chance word or scene that word may convey to us.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant that Mary Shelley has written this guy to be such a twat. Because if she had written about a woman who had done this, she would have gotten shit done. If a woman had made this creature, like gone on this big, whatever, like, when you're like in a fit of,
yes,
whatever, like when
Angst.
you're really obsessed with something.
When
you're really obsessed with something, and she had been obsessed and she had made this creature, she would have like talked to it. She would have been like, okay, how you doing? I mean, he just like ran away and like hit his head in the covers. If a woman had done this, she'd been like, okay, how are you feeling? Do we need to talk about anything? I've made you. You're a brand new person in this world. What do we need to talk about? And then they would have like worked it out and it would have been fine from the beginning. Yeah. Victor just ran away. And this creature just wakes up and he's like, what the heck? Where am I? What is this?
Yeah.
And then he just runs away and starts killing people because he doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
A woman would have dealt with her shit.
Prairie Stone Collectibles says word. And they're also saying in the chat, what a jerk.
Yeah.
Wallowing in self-pity. And then Jamie says, I was thinking that same thing. At least tell Elizabeth so she can go handle his shit.
So the fact that a woman has written Victor this way is better than if a man would have written Victor this way, I think. Because she's like, this is how men deal with their shit. They don't. Way to go, Mary Shelley.
But I mean, I don't think she was stepping out to make that statement on purpose.
I do. I'm gonna just forever believe that Mary Shelley was trying to say that men don't deal with their shit.
Now, although Mary Shelley's mom died in childbirth, she was an avid feminist. Yeah. Or an ardent feminist, I guess I should say.
I'm pro Mary Shelley.
Victor is so self-centered. I hate him more with each passing page, someone says. Okay, so this is a little inset. It's like a poem. I don't know if it's by him or not. But he says, we rest. A dream has power to poison sleep. We rise. One wandering thought pollutes the day. We feel, conceive or reason, laugh or weep, embrace fond woe or cast our cares away. It is the same, for be it joy or sorrow, the path of its departure still is free. Man's yesterday may ne'er be like his morrow, naught may endure but mutability. Okay. So it was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. A mist covered both that and the surrounding mountains. Presently a breeze dissipated the cloud, and I descended upon the glacier. The surface is very uneven, rising like the waves of a troubled sea, descending low and interspersed by rifts that sink deep. The field of ice is almost a league in width, but I spent nearly 2 hours in crossing it. The opposite mountain is a bare perpendicular rock. From the side where I now stood, Montevert was exactly opposite, at the distance of a league, and above it rose Mont Blanc in awful majesty. I remained in a recess of the rock, gazing on this wonderful and stupendous scene. The sea, or rather the vast river of ice, wound among its dependent mountains, whose aerial summits hung over its recesses. Their icy and glittering peaks shone in the sunlight over the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. I exclaimed, "Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life." Oh my gosh, he's so dramatic.
He is so dramatic.
As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man at some distance, advancing towards me with superhuman speed.
Oh, no.
Dun, dun, dun.
Stuff's about to get real.
Finally, we've had like a chapter and a half of all this mournful, romantic, gothic language, and now we're going to get some action. He bounded over the crevices in the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature, also as he approached, seemed to exceed that of a man.
Uh-oh.
I was troubled. A mist came over my eyes, and I felt a faintness seize me. Oh my God, he's going to pass out.
Oh, he's going to pass out.
But I was quickly restored by the cold gale of the mountains. I perceived as the shape came nearer, sight tremendous and abhorred, that it was the wretch whom I had created.
The wretch.
So he has like bumped into him in the midst of this beautiful place.
Fancy seeing you here.
I trembled with rage and horror, resolving to wait his approach and then close with him in mortal combat.
Mortal combat. Finish him.
He approached. His countenance bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. But I scarcely observed this. Rage and hatred had at first deprived me of utterance, and I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious detestation and contempt. "Devil!" I exclaimed.
Devil!
"Do you dare approach me? And do not you fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect, or rather stay, that I may trample you to dust. And oh, that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims whom you have so diabolically murdered."
How does he think he's going to trample this guy? If he's so big, what's he think he's going to do?
Victor is such a wuss. I mean,
yeah, he almost fainted. Don't tell him to be gone. Be gone.
Okay.
Well, shit. Then what?
He's going to, now look, the being is going to speak. I don't think we've heard him speak yet.
We haven't.
"I expected this reception," said the demon. "All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life?
Wow. Not only can he speak, but he's quite eloquent.
Quite. Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind.
Yeah.
If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at your peace.
Oh, God, he has conditions.
But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends.
Bruh.
Whoa. I mean,
wow, the monster is surprising. Insightful.
Jamie said at first, does the monster even understand this BS? But yeah, I mean, I think he does. Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation. Come on then, that I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed.
Are they just gonna like put their dukes up and just like battle?
Well, I think they're just gonna yell eloquently at each other.
They're just gonna yell.
My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said, "Be calm.
Chill, bro.
I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred on my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple."
Oh. He has supple joints.
"But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the part which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed."
Not only is he an eloquent speaker, he's also had time to read the Bible.
Well, I mean, just think about it. I mean, he's like somebody else's head. I mean, I'm sure maybe he has memories.
Past
and stuff,
memories
like,
from his body parts.
Yeah, maybe he has knowledge in there already.
Yikes.
"Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall be virtuous." So he's saying that he was just cast out of society. You know, it's been years. And that he was a good person until everybody just was, hated him.
It's like a dog. So this person has this puppy and he doesn't want it and he like throws it out in the gutter. And then this dog has to like fight to survive because he doesn't know any better. He just thinks that his owner hates him.
Right.
And so then he goes off and has to be scrappy to survive out there. And then he ends up biting somebody. And then it's not his fault that he bit somebody.
Right. I know. That's the thing. And Jamie says, is the monster just like Jiminy Cricket and actually the voice of Victor's conscience? Maybe so.
Maybe.
Christine has a premonition of what might be happening.
Oh.
"Begone, I will not hear you."
Oh, I don't want to listen to this shit.
"There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, or let us try our strength in a fight in which one must fall."
Victor, you're going to lose.
Victor.
You have no chance.
Okay, so now the monster says, "How can I move thee? Will no entreaties cause thee to turn a favorable eye upon thy creature who implores thy goodness and compassion? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone, miserably alone? You, my creator, abhor me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing? They spurn and hate me. He's talking about everybody. Yeah. The desert, the desert mountains and dreary glaciers are my refuge. I have wandered here many days. The caves of ice, which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me like your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do and arm themselves for my destruction. Shall I not then hate them who abhor me? I will keep no terms with my enemies. I am miserable, and they shall share my wretchedness. Yet it is in your power to recompense me and deliver them from an evil which it only remains for you to make so great, that not only you and your family, but thousands of others shall be swallowed up in the whirlwinds of its rage. Let your compassion be moved, and do not disdain me. Listen to my tale. When you have heard that, abandon or commiserate me, as you shall judge that I deserve, but hear me. The guilty are allowed by human laws, bloody as they are, to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, and yet you would, with a satisfied conscience, destroy your own creature. Oh, praise the eternal justice of man. Yet I ask you not to spare me. Listen to me, and then if you can, and if you will, destroy the work of your hands. Wow. Okay, let's see what he's going to ask him to do. Okay, wait, we're back to Victor again. Why do you call to my remembrance, I rejoined, circumstances of which I shudder to reflect, that I have been the miserable origin and author? Cursed be the day, abhorred devil, in which you first saw light. Cursed, although I curse myself, be the hands that formed you. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left me no power to consider whether I am just to you or not. Begone, relieve me from the sight of your detested form. Thus I relieve thee, my creator, he said, and placed his hated hands before my eyes, which I flung from me with violence. Thus I take from thee a sight which you abhor. Still thou canst listen to me and grant me thy compassion. By the virtues that I once possessed, I demand this from you. Hear my tale. It is long and strange, and the temperature of this place is not fitting to your fine sensations. Come to the hut upon the mountain. The sun is yet high in the heavens before it descends to hide itself beyond yon snowy precipices and illuminate another world. You will have heard my story and can decide. On you it rests whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin.
Wow.
So he's like, you're either going to listen to me.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to rain down on all of humankind.
See, if it had been a woman,
this, vengeance.
None of this would have happened, because the woman would have talked to the creature from the beginning. How are you feeling? What do you need?
Yeah. As he said this, he led the way across the ice, and I followed. My heart was full, and I did not answer him. But as I proceeded, I weighed the various arguments that he had used, and determined at least to listen to his tale. I was partly urged by curiosity, and compassion confirmed my resolution. I had hitherto supposed him to be the murderer of my brother, and I eagerly sought a confirmation or denial of this opinion. For the first time also I felt what the duties of a creator towards his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. We've been saying that all along, Victor. These motives urged me to comply with his demand. We crossed the ice, therefore, and ascended the opposite rock. The air was cold, and the rain again began to descend. We entered the hut, the fiend with an air of exultation, I with a heavy heart and depressed spirits. but I consented to listen, and seating myself by the fire, which my odious companion had lighted, he thus began his tale.
So what is the next chapter going to be? The monster's account?
The demon.
Do we have time to go one more?
Yeah, I mean...
this one's kind of long.
Well,
Maybe not.
I counted the pages. I think it's only like 23 pages all together. So
We've almost been going an hour, so we'll keep going.
Okay.
All right, chapter 11.
This is the story of what's been happening with the demon.
Okay. So this is going to be his account, you think?
I'm going to read the comments for a second. Yeah, it is, I think. Oh, yeah. I think that Beth says, I think the general theme of books, nothing good comes when man tries to play God.
True.
And then Jamie says, going back to the Mary Shelley thing, remember she wrote this while trapped inside from bad weather with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron. She was probably annoyed and fed up with these guy writers. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, she's like, you want me to participate in this game that you think you're going to win? Well, we'll see.
Mm-hmm. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. This is the monster speaking. Mm-hmm. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. A strange multiplicity of sensation seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time. And it was, indeed, a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses.
Ooh, that's weird.
By degrees, I remember a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then came over me and troubled me. But hardly had I felt this, when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. I walked, and I believe descended, but I presently found a great alteration in my senses. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch or sight, but I now found that I could wander on at liberty, with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. The light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat wearying me as I walked, I sought a place where I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I laid by the side of a brook, resting from my fatigue, until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me from my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on a tree or lying on the ground. I shaked my thirst at the brook, and then lying down was overcome by sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold also, and half frightened, as it were, instinctively finding myself so desolate. Before I had quitted your apartment, an old sensation of cold, I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of night. I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew and could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain invade me on all sides, I sat down and wept.
Oh,
bruh.
God, that's really bad.
I hope Victor feels like a real tool after this.
Victor's wretched. That's their favorite way to describe themselves. Victor's wretched already, so I'm sure this is just gonna,
yeah,
be the icing on the cake. Soon
a gentle light stole over the heavens and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up and beheld a radiant form rise among the trees. And then there's an asterisk, and it says the moon. Mm. So,
because he didn't know what it was.
Right. So he's saying that he beheld a radiant form rise among the trees. And the author has an asterisk there. And at the bottom in the footnotes, it says it's the moon. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but it enlightened my path. And I again went out in search of berries. I was still cold when under one of the trees I found a huge cloak, with which I covered myself and sat down upon the ground. No distinct idea occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light and hunger and thirst and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Several changes of day and night passed, and the orb of the night had greatly lessened. When I began to distinguish my sensations from each other, I gradually saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink, and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. So he can't really see. He's just kind of like, it's not coming together yet.
Yeah, his brain's not firing.
He's like a newborn. Mm-hmm. You know, newborns can't really decipher shape.
Right.
Right? That's crazy.
Although he has these memories back in this old brain somewhere, but it's got to start. It's got to restart.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And, you know, you can really, I mean, I don't know. I guess some men would write like this, but I mean, you can really hear that woman's point of view, I think that so too. Empathy from it being a child that doesn't know, you know, what to do or how to feed itself or whatever.
I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. I began also to observe with greater accuracy the forms that surrounded me, and to perceive the boundaries of the radiant roof of light which canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the pleasant songs of the birds, but was unable. Sometimes I wished to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence again. So he's like trying to speak, and he's scaring himself.
Yeah, isn't that terrible?
God, I can't stand it. The moon had disappeared from the night, and again, with a lessened form, showed itself. So he's observing the phases of the moon, while I still remained in the forest. My sensation had by this time become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to the light and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees one herb from another. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, while those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at its warmth and experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects.
Interesting.
I examined the materials of the fire, and to my joy found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I was pained at this, and sat still watching the operations of the fire. The wet wood which I had placed near the heat dried, and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and by touching the various branches I discovered the cause, and busied myself in collecting a great quantity of wood, that it might dry and have a plentiful supply of fire. When night came on and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves, and placed wet branches upon it, and then, spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground and sunk into sleep. So
that was kind of a cute description of him teaching himself what fire was about.
He's like putting stuff on it, and he's like, that won't work. And then he trial and error, and I can't stand it.
And then he's like, oh, the dry leaves burned. I'll go get some more and let it dry out.
I can't take it. It was morning when I awoke, and my first care was to visit the fire. I uncovered it, and a gentle breeze quickly fanned it into a flame. I observed this also, and contrived a fan of branches, which roused the embers when they were nearly extinguished. When night came again, I found with pleasure that the fire gave light as well as heat, and that the discovery of this element was useful to me for my food. For I found some of the offals, I don't know that word, OFFALS,
I don't know.
Offals? Offals?
I don't know.
I can't stand it. That the travelers had left had been roasted and tasted much more savory than the berries I gathered from the trees. I tried, therefore, to dress my food in the same manner, placing it on the live embers. I found that the berries were spoiled by this operation, and the nuts and roots much improved.
Oh.
He's learning to cook. He's taking a culinary course out in the woods.
He's really teaching himself.
I'm so happy for him. Food, however, became scarce, and I often spent the whole day searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pangs assuage the pains of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place I had hitherto inhabited, to seek for one where the few wants I experienced would be more easily satisfied. In this emigration, I exceedingly lamented the loss of fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not how to reproduce it. I gave several hours to the serious consideration of this difficulty, but I was obliged to relinquish all attempts to supply it. And, wrapping myself up in my cloak, I struck across the woods toward the setting sun. I passed 3 days in these rambles, and at length discovered the open country. A great fall of snow had taken place the night before, and the fields were of one uniform white. The appearance was disconsolate. I found my feet chilled by the cold damp outside that covered the ground. So he's off in search of more food. He can't reproduce his fire, and now he's found snow, and he's really cold, and he needs some shoes.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 7 in the morning. How does he know what time it is? It was about 7 in the morning.
I think we have to go with it a little. I'm thinking that there's a few,
And I longed to obtain food and shelter. At length I perceived a small hut on a rising ground, which had doubtless been built for the convenience of some shepherd. This was a new sight to me, and I examined the structure with great curiosity. Finding the door open, I entered. An old man sat in it near a fire, over which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing a noise, and perceiving me, shrieked loudly, and quitting the hut, ran across the fields with a speed of which his debilitating form hardly appeared capable. His appearance different from any I had ever seen before, and his flight somewhat surprised me. But I was enchanted by the appearance of the hut, here in the snow, and rain could not penetrate. The ground was dry, and it presented to me then this exquisite and divine retreat as a pandemonium appeared to the demons of hell after their sufferings in the lake of fire. I greedily devoured the remnants of the shepherd's breakfast, which consisted of bread, cheese, milk, and wine. The latter, however, I did not like. Then, overcome by fatigue, I lay down among some straw and fell asleep. He doesn't like wine.
I wonder why that's important to put in there.
Well, I think it makes him childlike.
Oh, yeah.
I think it makes him childlike. So he really enjoyed his milk and cheese and bread, but the wine, I didn't care for that. I think it makes him like a kid. I like it. It was noon when I awoke, and allured by the warmth of the sun, which shone brightly on the white ground, I determined to recommence my travels. And depositing the remains of the peasant's breakfast in a wallet I found, and proceeded across the field for several hours, until at sunset I arrived at a village. How miraculous did this appear! The huts, the neater cottages, and the stately houses engaged my admiration and by turns.
Oh no, he's gonna bust up into this little community, and I'm sure that's not gonna be good.
Yeah. The vegetables in the garden, the milk and the cheese that I saw placed at the windows of some of the cottages allured my appetite. One of the best of these I entered, but I had hardly placed my foot within the door before the children shrieked, and one of the women fainted. The whole village was roused. Some fled, some attacked me, until grievously bruising by stones and many other kinds of missile weapons, I escaped into the open country and fearfully took refuge in a low hovel, quite bare, and making a wretched appearance after the palaces I had beheld in the village. This hovel, however, joined a cottage of a neat and pleasant appearance, but after my late dearly bought experience, I dared not enter it. My place of refuge was constructed of wood, but so low that I could without difficulty sit upright in it. No wood, however, was placed on the earth which formed the floor, but it was dry, and although the wind entered in by numerous chinks, I found it an agreeable asylum from the snow and rain. So he's like in a little lean-to type thing that's attached to the house. Here then I retreated and lay down to have a shelter, however miserable from the inclemency, I can't say that, of the season, and soon more from the barbarity of man. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel that I might view the adjacent cottage and discover if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the back of a cottage and surrounded on all sides, which were exposed by a pigsty and a clear pool of water. One part was open, and by that I had crept in, but now covered every crevice by which I might be perceived with stone and wood, yet in such manner that I might move them on occasion to pass out. All the light I enjoyed came through the sty, and that was sufficient for me. I'm going to let you go.
Where are you?
Right there,
Okay.
having.
God, he's living in a pigsty.
Yeah.
Literally. Having thus arranged my dwelling and carpeted it with clean straw, I retired, for I saw the figure of a man at a distance, and I remembered too well my treatment the night before, so to trust myself in his power. I had first, however, provided for any sustenance for that day by a loaf of coarse bread, which I purloined, and a cup with which I could drink more conveniently than from my hand of the pure water which flowed by my retreat. The floor was a little raised, so that it was kept perfectly dry, and by its vicinity to the chimney of the cottage it was tolerably warm. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur which might alter my determination. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence, the rain-dropping branches and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water when I heard a step, and looking through a small chink, I beheld a young creature with a pail on her head passing before my hovel. The girl was young and of gentle demeanor, unlike what I have since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be, yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat and a linen jacket being her only garb. That's what I think that's a misprint. Her fair hair was plaited but not adorned. She looked patient yet sad. I lost sight of her, and in about a quarter of an hour she returned, bearing the pail, which was now partly filled with milk. As she walked along, seemingly incommoded by the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a deeper despondence. Uttering a few sounds with an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her and bore it to the cottage himself. She followed, and they disappeared. Presently I saw the young man again, with some tools in his hand, cross the field behind the cottage, and the girl was also busied, sometimes in the house and sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottage had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. In one of those was a small and almost imperceptible chink, through which the eye could just penetrate. He's got a peephole.
Yeah.
He's
being a
probably
creeper.
not good. Through this crevice, a small room was visible, whitewashed and clean, but very bare of furniture. In one corner, near a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer which employed her hands, and she sat down beside the old man, who, taking up an instrument, began to play and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale.
Oh.
It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch, who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love.
Oh.
He played a sweet, mournful air, which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, of which the old man took no notice, until she sobbed audibly. He then pronounced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering powering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never before experienced, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window, unable to bear those emotions.
So he has been up until this point almost like a puppy, curious. He's going to town and he sees all this food and he's like, I want to go in there. I want to go see what that's all about. And he goes in there and they're all like shooing him out and like kicking him like a dog that's just entered your house. And now then he's peeping. He's watching. Was he playing an instrument or was he singing?
Who, the old man?
Yeah.
He was playing the instrument, and
Okay.
then he made a few sounds, it said at the end.
Okay, so now then he's observing art, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is what sets animals apart from humans, is art and culture.
Beauty.
Mm-hmm. And so he's perceiving love. He's perceiving love and art for the first time.
Yeah, and
which is going to make a huge difference for him.
Yeah,
this is a turning point.
Yes, in an empathetic way, because obviously he doesn't love her, but he perceives her love in her emotion, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Soon after this, the young man returned, bearing on his shoulders a load of wood. The girl met him at the door, helped to relieve him of his burden, and taking some of the fuel into the cottage, placed it on the fire. Then she and the youth went apart into a nook of the cottage, and he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. I bet he did. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. She seemed pleased and went into the garden for some roots and plants, which she placed in water and then upon the fire. She afterwards continued her work whilst the young man went into the garden and appeared busily employed in digging and pulling up roots. After he had been employed thus about an hour, the young woman joined him, and they entered the cottage together. The old man had, in the meantime, been pensive, but on the appearance of his companions he assumed a more cheerful air, and they sat down to eat. The meal was quickly dispatched. The young woman was again occupied in arranging the cottage. The old man walked before the cottage in the sun for a few minutes, leaning on the arm of the youth. Nothing could exceed in beauty the contrast between these two excellent creatures. One was old, with silver hairs and a countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and his features were molded with the finest symmetry, yet his eyes and attitude expressed the utmost sadness and despondency. The old man returned to the cottage, and the youth, with tools different from those he had used in the morning, directed his steps across the fields. Night quickly shut in, but to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottagers had a means of prolonging light by the use of tapers, and was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasure I experienced in watching my human neighbors. In the evening, the young girl and her companion were employed in various occupations which I did not understand. And the old man again took up the instrument which produced the divine sounds that had enchanted me in the morning. So soon as he had finished, the youth began, not to play, but to utter sounds that were monotonous, and neither resembling the harmony of the old man's instrument, nor the songs of the birds. So he was singing.
Yeah.
I since found that he read aloud, but at that time I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. The family, after having been thus occupied for a short time, extinguished their lights and retired, as I conjectured, to rest.
So he's learned about music, he's learned about singing, instruments, he's learned about candles. He's learning a lot. I'm very impressed.
He's really doing it.
Yeah.
The
All
next
right, so that was the
chapter-
end of that chapter.
Yeah.
I think we need to probably cut it there. We've been on an hour and 20.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that was great. Look, it's Nate. Hey, Nate. So, that was really good.
Nate. Yeah, Jamie, were they getting it on? I think that's what he implied. Yes.
So, we're about halfway through. I think we're at like the halfway point, which is awesome. That's very exciting.
Maybe, yeah. I started to say maybe a little farther, but probably no. Probably about halfway.
Okay, so we've done, let's see, what episode is this? This is our 6th.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
6th. So we should maybe have 6 or 7 more probably.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think we're quite halfway. Like, I think it's basically half.
Okay.
But let's see, we're on page 121 of 260.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So not quite half.
So if the mood hits us, we might do an episode on Halloween.
Yeah, we're thinking about it.
But if not, we will resume next Saturday.
We're thinking of putting an episode out on Halloween. So maybe you can look forward to that. Okay. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us live. I think we consistently had between 20 and 30 people almost the whole time, which is awesome. So thank you all here on YouTube. Those of you who are listening out there in podcast land on your favorite app, we're really glad that you're joining us. We would love for you to come over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Typically, we're doing reselling of vintage items and collectibles. And on Friday night, we have a show called Flippin and Sippin, which we do live, 9:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. We would love for you to join us on YouTube anytime and come hang out with us.
Val, we had fun with you too. The chat is telling us that this was fun.
Good.
Also, you guys that consistently watch on YouTube, if you don't mind, if you do have podcasts that you listen to, just look us up on your podcast app and give us a good review.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, everybody. I hope that your weekend is fantastic. Do something fun and have a good Halloween on Monday.
Yes, happy Halloween, everybody.
All right, before you guys leave on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. You can leave us a comment if you're listening later. And as always, everybody, make sure you stay tuned to see what Fatbird finds next. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.